Hey everyone, welcome to my presentation on Our Big Story. The story starts out with God creating the universe, and from that, He made our Earth, which essentially just started out as a formless mass. Nevertheless, the laws and principles that we follow were already at work. I'm going to briefly talk about a few of what I think are the most important laws, and they are the Newton's laws. Newton's first law, also called the law of inertia, basically states that an object, whether it's sitting still or moving, will continue to do so unless it is acted upon by an outside force, which, as you can see, can either be a good or a bad thing. In Newton's second law of motion, he describes not only the force needed to change the motion of an object, but also the acceleration that will result. And the equation is the force is equal to the mass times the acceleration. But simply put, if you need to move a really big jumbo jet, you're going to have to find a really strong guy to do it. And finally, perhaps the most useful yet unforgiving of the Newton's laws, Newton's third law of motion. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's this law that explains why a rocket can lift off, or why it's a bad idea to shoot a big gun while sitting in a wheelchair. Next up, a principle that I found particularly interesting. But for Archimedes, discovering this principle was literally his eureka moment. Put into simple terms, it says that if I'm a 200-pound man swimming out in the middle of the lake, I better displace at least 200 pounds of water, otherwise I'm going to be a 200-pound man sinking out in the middle of the lake. Now on to the third day of creation, where God separated the dry land and the water and gave us our continents and our oceans. But even though He formed it this way, it doesn't mean that it's permanently this way. In fact, the theory of plate tectonics provides a very plausible description of our ever-changing Earth. As you can see in the diagram, the outer layers of the Earth are ever transforming. This phenomena is mostly due to three different types of boundaries, called convergent, divergent, and transform. A convergent boundary is one where two plates come together and one subducts underneath the other, diving deep into the mantle where it will be recycled. A divergent boundary is one where two plates are spreading apart from each other, giving an avenue for liquid hot magma to reach the surface, cool, and then become part of the new crust. And finally, a transform boundary is one where two plates slide alongside of each other, merely changing position. After one plate has been subducted under another plate, it is melted in the mantle, it becomes magma, and then once it reaches the surface, it becomes lava, which then cools to become igneous rock. And on a side note, that lava that I'm standing next to is really, really hot. On the subject of changes in the Earth's crust, there are three principal types of mountains: volcanic, fault block, and fold. This picture is a great small-scale depiction of a cutaway of a fold mountain. Minerals are one of the more breathtaking substances that is harvested from the Earth's crust. They are identified using 8 different properties: crystal form, hardness, cleavage, fracture, color, streak, luster, and specific gravity. Now on to the fourth day, where God created the sun, the moon, the planets, and all of the stars. Most importantly are the planets that make up our solar system, and of course the sun. The sun is the center of our solar system, followed next by Mercury, which is the first planet from the sun. Due to its close proximity to the sun, Mercury only has an 88-day year. The second planet after that is Venus, and it's the third brightest object in the sky. The only things brighter are the sun and our own moon. Of course, we're third, and we know enough about our planet. Next is Mars, which is the fourth planet from the sun, and since it's about 1.5 times further away from the sun than we are, a year there takes about 23 Earth months. Next is Jupiter, which is the fifth planet from the sun. It's also the largest and the fastest spinning planet. And planet number 6 is Saturn, which is famous for its rings. Next is Uranus, which is the seventh planet from the sun, which is the furthest planet that you can see with the naked eye. And finally, the eighth planet, Neptune, which is sometimes referred to as Uranus's twin. And finally, onto the sun. The sun gets its energy through a nuclear reaction, where tritium and deuterium come together in fusion and release an atom of helium, some energy, and a neutron. The energy released is released in the form of electromagnetic energy, which we perceive as heat and light. Electromagnetic energy is valuable to us because it can cross the vacuum of space in order to reach Earth and impart its energy for our uses. The interesting thing about electromagnetic energy is that most of it is invisible. In fact, only between about 440 nanometers and 700 nanometers can you actually see visible light in colors. One interesting aspect of the wavelengths of light gave rise to a tool that we use to measure the expansion of our universe, and it's called the Doppler effect. Simply stated, the Doppler effect says that a lighted source moving towards us will appear more bluish green, whereas when it's moving away from us, it will appear more red. And on the fifth and sixth days, God created all the animals in the sea, all the animals in the air, and all the animals on the land. But biology wouldn't be possible without DNA. And to be completely honest, DNA wouldn't be possible without molecules, and molecules wouldn't be possible without atoms. Atoms are made up of three different parts: protons and neutrons, and electrons. The protons and neutrons are bonded together in the nucleus of the atom, and the electrons orbit the outside. Because of the positive charge of the protons and the negative charge of the electrons, atoms can bond together and bond with other types of atoms to make new substances. It's because of one special type of bonding called hydrogen bonding that we are able to experience water in all three phases here on Earth: solid, liquid, and gas. Thank you very much for your time, and have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.